So we're waiting for one of our panelists. I don't know if Chao Liu is here. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. So, guys, if you want to come and sit down. While we're waiting, I just want to ask sort of the audience, do you get an idea of what kind of businesses you all are and where you are on a cross-border journey? Can you put your hands up if you work for a service provider? Okay. A retailer, products? No? Okay. One. And, wow, okay, that's so, what else we got? Marketplaces. Okay. Journalists. Investors. Brilliant. There. Oh, okay, that's more like it. That's more like it. Another thing, how many of you have been involved in cross-border trade in the last 6 months? Keep your hand up if you found it easy. Oh, OK. Brilliant. We're done. Well, I've got this panel here. I'm going to ask each of you guys to introduce yourselves just quickly, and we'll go around. I want the conversation to be quite open. So we'll turn it over to the audience in a second. But don't wait to be asked a question. Put your hand up if you agree, disagree, want to sort of debate a point that one of the panelists makes. And hopefully we can make it quite interactive. So should we just start? Ozzy, could you give yourself a bit of an introduction to the audience, please? Thanks.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Osvaldo Spadano. You can call me Ozzy. It's much easier. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Elastera. That's my fourth startup. We provide managed cloud solutions to online retailers such as Boohoo, Graze, Byredo, and many others. Before that, I was co-founder and CTO of a company called Venda back in 2001, the pioneer of SaaS e-commerce, which was acquired by NetSuite. And after that, I went on the other side of the table, and I was CTO of my own startup again, B2C, and also of companies such as Yoox, Alex and Alexa. And that's where I found a problem that no one was solving, and therefore I went on the other side of the table once again to solve that problem.
OK, great. Thank you. Chao.
Hi, so good morning, everyone. My name is Chao Liu, and I'm the co-founder for Avenue 51. And Avenue 51 is there to assist UK brands to enter into the Chinese market. And we do that by offering an integrated IT solution to a number of Chinese marketplaces. We offer marketing, logistics, and also payment solutions. Previous to that, I co-founded a logistics company called 51 Parcel that specializes in shipping from UK to China. 51 Parcel currently ships over 40 tons a day to China, so we're one of the largest for e-commerce cross-border. And also 51 Parcel was one of the first companies to be approved by the Chinese government for direct entry. So for anyone who is interested in entering to the Chinese market, you may want to know that there's going to be huge changes in customs and regulations of entering goods into China. So we're one of the first to help British brands to take their goods into China.
Great, thanks. And Deepak.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name's Deepak Goyal. I'm the head of e-commerce at Currencies Direct. We're traditionally a foreign exchange broker working with businesses and individuals that have foreign exchange needs. In 2008, we started working in the e-commerce sector. We currently help thousands of online retailers around the world deal with their currency issues, both when they're buying stock from overseas or when they're receiving funds in from overseas sales. We've got offices around the world, predominantly in all the usual e-commerce locations, UK, US, France, China. Looking forward to the debate today. Thank you.
Great. Martin.
Hi. So my name is Martin Coedo. I lead the strategy efforts for commerce in a very innovative startup called IBM. We have been doing this for the last 3 years. My role is basically helping companies and actually also IBM to understand the value of commerce and the trends for the future, including internationalization and best practices in omnichannel and things like that. Before that, I used to work as a strategy consultant also for the Yoox group, now the Yoox Net-a-Porter group. And before that, I worked 5 years in eBay Enterprise, also leading strategy and finance.
Great, thanks. Jeremy.
Good morning, my name's Jeremy Cook. I am the Chief Economist and Head of Currency Strategy for Worldfirst. We are an international payments company, direct competitors to Deepak's Currencies Direct, hence why we put Masood in between us.
Yep. Thank you.
Earlier I asked them, are you guys direct competitors hoping for some sort of, kind of bullshit joke? Like, no, we do this and we kind of do that. And I went, yeah, we are.
Yeah. straight down the line.
Yeah, straight out there.
So we are an international payments company helping facilitate international payments for over 200,000 clients, 35,000 of which are in the e-commerce space. And this may be out of our offices in Singapore, in Hong Kong, Australia, 2 in the US, or the headquarters here in UK. It is my job to advise those clients on the risks that we see in the currency markets, the likely change in the political climate, for example, in China, in the United States, or in the Eurozone moving forward, and how they can better facilitate their international payments and international service offerings.
Great. So a good range of service providers, strategists, and let's kick off. Deepak, can you tell us a bit about what you've seen in the growth of cross-border commerce and how that's been sort of enabled, I guess, by marketplaces?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Marketplaces are, what do marketplaces do? They provide instant access. When I say instant, I mean very quick access to anybody to get onto the international stage. It's very rare that you see an infrastructure such as what the marketplaces are now all providing to sellers. And what it means is people that are speculating on online retail in China, US, wherever it may be, they can very quickly and easily, without investing in their own infrastructure, access these markets. And the ecosystem around it that develops to support those activities are all available through those marketplaces and obviously directly as well. So it provides a fantastic stage for huge growth, which is what we're seeing right now in this space. A lot of online retailers, the numbers of online retailers globally is growing at an alarming rate. It's very positive for the industry, and it's all down to what the marketplaces are providing.
Jeremy, do you have any wild forecasts that you've been toying with?
Donald Trump as president, maybe. But
unfortunately, that's not so wild.
Yeah, exactly. No, as far as the e-commerce space goes, it has to be the global center of gravity economically has started to shift back east and has been since the global financial crisis. We basically loaned it here in the West for a couple of 100 years, and now we're sending it back to Asia. There's a well-quoted stat. I don't know if I missed it earlier, but every second 3 Indians join the internet, and that is the growth that we're likely to see over the course of the next 20 to 25 years. From a UK business, from a UK SME point of view, the one thing that I've always liked about, certainly being European, and maybe that's a comment about the referendum coming up as well, is that unlike the United States, for example, we've always had to be cross-border. Businesses have always had to be cross-border in Europe. If you wanted to, you had, before the creation of the euro, companies' ledgers and companies' balance sheets were often quoted in 3 or 4 different currencies, and now can sustain themselves in 1 or 2. So we've always had the ability to change businesses very, very quickly to facilitate a cross-border commerce solution. And I think the change in dynamics, the change in buyer dynamics that we're likely to see from Asia and from the Asian market and the Asian demand sphere in the next 50, 60 years is the key component moving forward.
Chao Liu, how would you respond to that? Sort of, do you think your experience in Europe and in China? Do you think we've sort of learnt from our cross-border experience across Europe? Has that helped us, or are we still at a bit of a disadvantage globally? Yeah,
well, I think certainly for UK brands to enter into the Chinese market, I think they are. There's a lot for the UK brands to learn. So there's a huge culture gap between how business is done in China compared to how business is done in Europe. So what we found is a lot of the SME brands in the UK, they've discovered that they're hugely popular in China, and they don't even know why. So we've been working with a client who she's almost a one-man band, and a couple of months ago she had orders of, and her sites used to take 1 or 2 orders a day, and then suddenly over half an hour she had orders of 1,000, and she couldn't understand why, and she thought it was she was being hacked her site, and then she checked, and the money was actually coming in, and these are all real orders. And then it took us 6 months to realise that it was actually a blogger, in a Chinese blogger, who said this product's great, and she happens to have 500,000 followings, and a lot of these followers started to buy her product, and that's how that's how this brand entered into the Chinese market without really ever knowing it. That's just one example of how in China e-commerce is very much driven, or particularly cross-border e-commerce is very much driven by social media, and that's something I think it's less important in Europe, but very, very important when we're talking about cross-border for China.
Interesting.
So we European are like bullying the China shop very often, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Just go there without understanding.
And also, but you were talking earlier when we were talking outside about the pressures that can be put on, the expectations about,
Right, yes.
some people have very high expectations of what they can achieve.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Others don't realize. I imagine in this example, she was suddenly overwhelmed by the ability to fulfill that, or inability to fulfill those orders. Huh?
Yeah, it's absolutely that. I've seen at board level, directors just having completely ridiculous expectation of what it means to go cross-border. I say, well, we will go to this place, could be Russia, could be China, whatever other country, and they're forecasting ridiculous amount of revenue, which obviously would never happen because it just takes time. It's a long-term investment. And they go with this kind of bing-bang approach, which usually either it doesn't work or they get it wrong. And the worst thing is that they invest so much sometimes in the wrong things without seeing the return on investment, rather than taking a kind of step-by-step approach where, for example, you might want to start using marketplaces first. Make it easy. Then if it works, make sure that your website is international with all the things which are needed. And then eventually, if you see a market working very well, start spinning off this side eventually and make something extremely local. And at an organizational level, at some point, start thinking about, should we have a local team? And if you have a local team, you also need to give them the levers for them to operate and succeed. And that's sometimes very, very difficult for organizations to do because they tend to centralize things and not give other teams the opportunity to succeed. As we heard before at Amazon, there are so many differences that a centralized team cannot possibly manage. So there are lots of problems at both level, expectations, how to think about going international, and the other problem I see very often is people think all the time about economy of scale, and that's wrong because as you go international, you just hit a complete new stream of demands. And if you don't put the capability for that stream of demand that very often is different, that's where the problem starts.
I think you've highlighted quite an important point there, which is the culture difference between businesses that are from the West and businesses that are from the East. In the West, we're much more calculated, we're much more strategic, whereas over in the East, you have to be much more opportunistic. Suddenly, you can have one product line that will shoot up in popularity, and suddenly, you're trying to manage the number of customers that are coming through. And that's sometimes quite difficult. You can't plan that kind of thing. It just happens. And the buyers in the East, they're much more affected by things like the blogs that you mentioned. They take a lot of influence from that. And they work in herds, as we discussed before. They kind of take a decision that they see somebody else doing something, and they want the same thing. And this is how a single product can suddenly go viral in a very short space of time. And that's difficult to manage for some Western boards.
It is difficult to manage if they don't build an organization, the processes and the tools for them to be very responsive and agile.
So, Martin, I hate to dump you in it, but as a strategist in this area, what would you suggest? I mean, because it is all about trying to balance that strategy, not spending too much, being able to react to growth. It's very hard to be that agile.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually listening to this discussion because I've been having this discussion for about 10 years now.
Okay, well, we've got like 45 minutes.
So, and before, talking about Asia, we were talking about, different European countries. And actually, I was having this discussion in eBay, and luckily, IBM has had that discussion before I joined in, We think the approach has always been being local, trying to localize the experience as much as possible, because you're talking about, what drives sales. That's a marketing avenue, which we, but it's also, that happens in Germany, that happens, in Italy, that happens in Spain. But it also is the experience that has to be local, is the payments. It's about, how you integrate with your mobile devices. For instance, Asia is far more transactional than we are. So it's, and I remember, if you look at, Rakuten or these kind of sites, in terms of consumer experience, it's not what we would call inspirational. Nevertheless, they sell, very big brands and luxury brands. So our approach has always been, to advise on a risk return. And we think there are ways to measure that risk return. And there are ways to understand, if you will have a successful deploy of your product in places like China. We've been, we spend a lot of time researching each market before advising brands.
How much is that? How much are you able to do that without actually having someone on the ground, checking the blogs, doing some real local research and understanding what is going to go big?
It's very important because I can draw on experience here. One of my customers was looking at the China market, and we've got a few Chinese speakers in our business. Of course, we've got an office over in Shenzhen in China. So we looked over our customer's website, which was in Mandarin, and we had one question after scanning this website, and that is, what on earth was their biscuit policy? Because the translation of cookies to biscuits was almost literal, and it's little things like that can completely throw all your efforts out of the way. So the point on localization is really, really important, and getting good quality translators in this case to support you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that having local resources help a lot, but also the availability of information is such a it's huge. So stuff like how the Chinese people purchasing habits, or German people purchasing habits, or which payment methods are being used in Germany or in France, or
we've learned this internally recently, in so much that everyone is a data business now, and I think we at Worldfirst have finally got to the point where we're starting to realize what kind of data we actually have. And it's been showing us that while 90% of our clients who are trading internationally and paying internationally here in Europe or in the United States still do it via a desktop computer, it's 50% in our Asian markets are doing it via mobile. So it's all via the app. So the weight that it put on us as a company for our IT infrastructure to make sure that the app, the translation, the compatibility with local operating systems and and the languages, be it in Singapore, Thailand, China, both in Cantonese obviously and in Mandarin, had to be there first before we put it into France, for example, because 95% of them are still using a desktop computer. As service providers, we're still learning from this market, let alone the people who are trying to get into it for the first time.
Yes, and I want to come back to that point actually. But, so you were going to.
So just coming back to the question of whether you need to have local people in that particular country, I think one of the best examples I can think of is the Body Shop. The Body Shop sells extremely well in China, yet they don't have an office there, and they don't officially sell Body Shop products in China. Because one of the main reasons is Body Shop don't do any animal testing, yet China requires animal testing in order for it to go into China through the official routes. However, Body Shop has a very, very strong product line that the Chinese consumers love. And again, that's been made popular by the Chinese social media. For Body Shop, for many years, they don't have an office there, and they don't have any Chinese employees in China. Yet they're still very, very successful. So I think because we're talking about cross-border e-commerce, I don't think it's important that you have to have people in that country, but I think it's important that you understand why the customers buy your product in that country. So you need that data.
Yeah. But possibly you have to have someone who can give you that information, right? I mean, some of it's not necessarily.
Yeah. And if we look at the Chinese example, because there are so many marketplaces, the likes of Alibaba, the likes of JD, they have a lot of that data. Through the marketplaces, you can extract the data about what type of customers are buying, whether they're male or female, what their hobbies are, what their financial, social standings are. So there's a huge amount of data that you can extract through the marketplaces, and that can be done by studying big data. And then on the other side, you can talk to the bloggers, you can talk to a lot of people who are reselling your product in that country, and you can gain a lot of
I guess the big challenge is not to get the data, it's to understand which data is useful and which not.
I mean, there's lots of data.
Exactly.
No one understands what it means.
98% of it is all white noise.
Yeah.
It's the 2% nuggets.
Yeah, but the other problem is online retailers already find it quite difficult. Only now they're coming to really work out how to manage all this common stuff and so on. And many of those are still extremely inefficient from the logistics, inbound, outbound, call center, and so they just don't get it right. And they have to go through years of experience to then continuously improve their operations. And as you go cross-border, all of a sudden, you need to localize. It's important. But as you do that, the complexity within your business goes up by a phenomenal amount. It just can disrupt operations, reporting, all sorts of things.
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things that I sort of teased out when we've been talking about this before is that going cross-border seems, you were talking about the app, reliance or focus on mobile in other countries and in Asia. And I think also it seems that experimenting or putting a toe in cross-border is almost a way to start testing out an omni-channel strategy, isn't it? You're starting to put some pressure on your own business in a digital way, further away from your home market, but perhaps it's actually testing out what you could do in your home market.
Actually, that's a good one, because many brands actually take that approach. So you can do that as long as you are compliant with, the maturity of the market at that moment. So let's say, if I have a luxury brand in Italy, right, like many of my clients, I say, well, I want to sell online in the UK, but you know what? I'm going to ship in 72 hours, and I'm not I'm not going to ensure that that's going to get to you in 72 hours. Well, the UK is the most complex market in terms of shipping and delivery. So basically, I can tell you that you're not going to be very successful unless your brand is, widely known, right? Because you're not compliant with the basic requirement of the market. So I think, as long as you are compliant with the minimum requirements, it is a way. But you have to be aware that if you don't go full steam, you're losing part of that market. So I guess from our point of view is, again, a risk return. You say, well, how big is this market? How much do I want to get into this market? And then you localize as far as you can capture the most value, or the value that you think you can get from that market.
Yeah, but how can you have an idea of the success that you can have and understanding the risk if you don't even try in the first place, if you don't have a set of data to look at, even if they're not perfect, but even imperfect data is important to have.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's basically part of my job today, and has been, is basically understanding, that's a discussion on understanding the potential of certain brand in a geography. It can be done without actually deploying in that geography. So if you have an offline presence, for instance, you can understand how much can be the impact on the online world, how much can be the impact on if you deploy an omnichannel strategy. Of course, those metrics are not totally exact, but I can tell you, in my experience, they are a very good proxy. Maybe I miss, 10, 20%, but depends on, and highly depends on the execution, of course.
Yeah.
But let's say if you sell 100 in the UK, and depending on your vertical, I can tell you, well, on average, brands that sell this with this positioning had X% of sales going through the online channel.
It's also interesting because some brick and mortar retailer who actually have an online presence, they're starting understanding to actually also do the opposite, which is having the online traffic and demand driving where the next shop is gonna open, because you can analyze where the customer coming from, where they're buying from their IP address. You can pinpoint the city, and then there is an indication to say, well, actually I should open a shop there.
So I think that there's differences in how Western businesses look at a new market compared to China. So what we typically find is that British companies, you have a board meeting and decide on a single strategy, whereas for a lot of how the Chinese marketplaces perform is we have 10 ideas, we explore all 10. We look at which ones work, which ones doesn't. We quickly withdraw from the ideas that don't work, and then we focus on the ideas that do work. And that's how, for Avenue 51, we're about to launch for one of the UK's top grocery stores into China. And the idea is that we launch into multiple marketplaces, multiple product lines, and using a variety of different strategies. Some of the strategies will work, some of the strategies will fail. But the idea is that we enter the market very, very quickly and very hard. And then we test that market.
That's perfect.
It's a much more sort of entrepreneurial approach, really, isn't it?
It's the typical lean startup approach kind of thing. Experiment quickly.
How easy was it to get that across to your client, the need to take that approach?
Well, I think
had they previously failed badly?
Well, I think if we look at the grocery market, so Marks and Spencer's was probably one of the first to enter into the Chinese market, and for the first couple of years, they spent. This is cross-border we're talking about. And for the first couple of years, they spent a lot of money on marketing, a lot of money on pushing the product. And they lost a lot of money through that. But they've learnt their mistakes. And what we know is the last Marks & Spencer launch, which was on JD selling wine, has been extremely successful. It was a relatively low investment, but the return was very, very good. And so what that shows is that for big organisations like Marks and Spencer's, they have learnt from their mistakes. And so for us, when we are now advising big companies to enter into China, there's lots of case studies of previously unsuccessful launches or expensive launches, whereas I think with those sorts of lessons, we can refine the ideas and make it much more efficient for UK brands to go into China.
Yeah. So I'd like to, taking that point a bit further forward, there's basically a whole raft of professional services and other services being provided around cross-border e-commerce, and you pretty much all represent organizations who are providing that. Can you maybe talk us through some of those things that you're seeing emerging as the key? I'm noticing the title of this panel is actually Raise the Operational Barriers. I haven't really spoken much about that yet, but I'm assuming you can work out what the barriers are by working out what are the services that are being provided. And
Yeah. Every element of business when it comes to cross-border trade now has a plethora of providers who can jump to the companies and help them with hands-on information. So these support providers are often providing the localization advice. They're providing a lot of useful information for organizations, so that it supports the point made earlier that you don't have to have all this internally. You can simply use this infrastructure. For online retail, I mean, what we see in the third-party seller space an awful lot is tax, translations, logistics, fulfillment, customer service. All of these areas sometimes are built into the marketplace, which is very accessible, but other times they're better delivered by unique providers externally.
So when we advise clients to go into the Chinese market, we look at 4 pillars. So number 1 is your sales channels. Number 2 is your marketing. Number 3 is your IT. And number 4 is your logistics. So if you have all 4, then the chances of success in China greatly increases.
But I mean, each one of those pillars is a massive,
Where does finance come in?
So, well, I think in China, if we look at the marketplaces, they already offer finance. So, in the case of Alibaba, they've got Alipay. JD has their own payment systems. Tencent have their own payment systems. Because the Chinese marketplaces are so powerful, they've already incorporated a lot of the finance services. I know it's not great news for you guys, but
We've got some partnerships.
but I mean, when we look at the 4 pillars, the sales channels. So in China, there are over 2,000 marketplaces, but the main ones are Alibaba's Tmall and Taobao, and then JD. I mean, those 2 marketplaces together count for 75% of all B2C trade. So if for any brand entering into the Chinese market, if you're on those 2 platforms, then that gives you a very good indication of how your brand will perform. Then we look at logistics. So again, we are integrated to a lot of the logistics providers and customs clearance, then IT solutions. So again, we're integrated to 20 different marketplaces. So Avenue 51's there to lower the barriers. I think for us, the biggest unknown is the marketing. Is how does the UK brands get their marketing right so that the Chinese consumers believe in the product or buy the product. I think that's the biggest unknown. I think the other 3 pillars are somewhat already set, and for service providers who are in those arenas, it's actually not that difficult.
Yeah. But Deepak and Jeremy, I mean, your businesses help sort of people hedge their currency risk, right? I mean, this is a big, significant area that I'm assuming, the marketplace is not ever going to be able to provide you that.
They'll be able to provide it eventually, of course, but it's probably not very high up on their radar. It's quite a specific thing to a business as well, and one size doesn't fit everyone when it comes to trying to take out foreign exchange risk. But you're absolutely right. It's a key part. We've seen huge movements in currencies over the last month or so, 2 months. We're going to see huge movements potentially in June, so let's see what happens there. And of course, closer in time, we've got all that activity that's going on that was referred to earlier in the US. So I think hedging a risk will be the least of people's concerns. Things go wrong there.
One thing that we also need to talk about is that SMEs and mini multinationals, which we call them internally at Worldfirst, these one-man bands who may be setting up in a bedroom in Stoke or a basement in Stockwell, as we set up, is that the payment solutions is provided by Alibaba, but I mean, much like where our companies came from, taking share away from the banks were doing it at pretty terrible rates, and Alibaba and other people like that are putting 4 or 5% on top of a transaction. Now, for a small company, which is still, in the first couple of years of its operation, has a fairly elastic margin, doesn't know how to price itself, 4 or 5% is a profit line done. You may be shipping 60,000 units a month, But if you're not making anything on it, then bye-bye and go back to school and see what happens there.
It's a danger area for marketplaces actually now, because if they don't get this right and support the post-sale elements of the financial elements of the transaction, then it can lead to a real effect on the business, as you've quite rightly said. Some of the marketplaces, not through their own fault, but just because of the systems and the way their banking's set up, are almost acting like big banks. They're not bridging that gap and providing really good value, accessible financial services such as bank accounts overseas quickly and easily. They're not providing those to some of the smaller sellers that exist.
It's actually quite interesting because the foreign exchange not only has an impact within the business, but also has a big impact in terms of the buying behavior. Because, especially when you do cross-borders, the cross-borders users typically are quite sophisticated users, okay? And they know how to compare, where to buy, get the best deal, basically. And if they see that they can get a product at a better price, even including the shipping costs and so on, they will go and buy it from US. And that has an impact on this kind of thing. So it's very important for companies to be totally aware of what's going on and be extremely quick and reactive and having the tools to be able to adjust the pricing and so on. You can't anymore go to a country and have a price that will last for the next season or the next year. It just doesn't work anymore. And also, actually, funny enough, I was talking about, it's the unit of economics. As you were saying, it's so important. I was talking 2 days ago to the CTO of an iconic brand here in UK, and they went to China on Alibaba, and they sold something like 7,000 units in one single day, which was very good for them. Their average price is quite high as well. But nevertheless, they did that because they were discounting the product. And, but then including all of those costs and so on, they ended up making a loss on every single product. Therefore, the loss was amplified. And therefore, you see, and these people are quite experienced, but nevertheless, people still don't really take a very close look on the unit of economics. And it's very dangerous then to do these kind of things.
I always hark back to the example of Groupon, when Groupon first launched here in the UK, and we saw a huge amount of businesses try to use Groupon as an amplifier, a magnifying glass for their business. Come in, use our product, and the ability for them, or the inability for them to fulfill those orders made sure that a huge amount of people actually made losses on it because they didn't know how to price themselves in this new market appropriately.
Okay. Please go ahead, and then we'll open it up for questions.
If we go back to the case of the hedging and the financial risks, or the foreign exchange risks, when we advise clients, there's really two strategies. So one is cross-border, i.e. the goods stay in the UK, and when a sale happens in somewhere like China, through our integration, we give the buyer's details to the merchant, and the merchant ships from the UK. And with platforms like Alibaba, the exchange rate happens on the sale. Therefore, you're somewhat limited to your foreign exchange risks. For much bigger companies, or for products where it's much more efficient to go into a bonded warehouse, that's where I think the currency risks are a lot bigger, because you're buying. Your products are manufactured in the UK, it's been shipped to China, it probably stays in a bonded warehouse for 2-3 months, where the exchange rates may have a huge impact on the bottom line.
Budget rates change on a month-by-month basis, well, especially in dollar China at the moment.
It'd be interesting to understand how far we think we are from a utility service across this that can sort of, I imagine it's not just around the corner. But any questions from here, please? I can.
Just about.
Okay, there we go. So Brexit, international trade is like a key discussion in the kind of Brexit debate. Now, if the UK did leave the EU, I'd be interested in the kind of positive or negative effects you think that would happen on your business and also on the UK. Because it seems like the debate is almost like a millennium bug kind of. It's all going to be terrible afterwards, so you should fear it. Whereas actually, I'm interested in the reality of it.
from a currency point of view, there's obviously going to be quite a lot of short-term volatility as sentiment changes backwards and forwards. So some great opportunities, some speculative opportunities for people that are that way inclined. But for businesses that have got cash flows in foreign currencies, probably quite a big problem coming up in terms of managing risk. And they need to put into place short-term solutions to be able to hedge that risk and see themselves through that. In terms of other areas, I mean, well, Brexit is something that's close to everyone's heart here. Don't know which way it's going to go necessarily. No one knows at the moment. But there seems to be a lot of noise from the let's leave the Brexit camp, which has been noisier than before. So I mean that's fueling all the volatility.
I'll come back here on June 24th and eat my shoe if we leave.
I probably will as well. Yeah.
Okay.
What are you
Get-
going to do?
get your diaries out.
In the US, though.
Chao, do you have a particular view on this? Because I'm interested in the kind of UK-Chinese relations rather than actually Europe relations.
Yeah, of course. I think for us, I'd like to hope that we're almost immune to the Brexit. Or if we do leave, I think if it does mean that the pound drops, it makes British products cheaper. So it may actually be an opportunity for a lot of the British brands to look towards China. And I think what we found in particularly this year is that a lot of the big companies are looking to China for their growth. Particularly if we look at the growth rate of the UK, we're looking at 2%, and Jos Osborne's keep sort of reducing that growth rate. But in China, particularly in cross-border, it's growing at 20, 40%, particularly the cross-border side. So I think the Brexit shouldn't affect the UK to Chinese opportunity.
Just one more point. At the beginning of the year, I published an article on five key markets for UK SMEs to be expanding into in 2016, 2017, and none of them were in the EU. It was the US, it was Australia, it was Singapore, it was Iran, and Vietnam. And those were the five areas to look at. The EU is not dead by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, it is still our biggest customer, but a diversified, rebalanced trade dynamics of the UK.
But that's where the risk is, right? Because I mean, if you guys leave us in the middle, actually, there's a question about how the trade agreements, remain afterwards, because that's the biggest thing, The EU, in terms of, market and in terms of retail, is quite self-sufficient, right? So actually, I think you might take a hit on that you might offset, with going somewhere else. But definitely, that is, to me, the biggest risk within, for the UK if they leave Europe.
Yeah.
So I was actually talking to a client a couple of weeks ago, and they're in the maternity space, selling formula milk, and they're saying they actually hope that Britain do leave the EU, because at the moment a lot of their sales to China are being restricted due to EU regulations. So they actually think it's going to be a very positive thing that Britain leaves, and Britain can then sign trade agreements with China on its own. But I guess that's just one particular example. So again, from sort of UK and China perspective, I don't think it's all bad news if Britain does leave.
That's a slightly futurist question, but I'm just wondering if anyone on the panel has some thoughts on maybe online currencies. And I've seen quite a few things out in Asia about people trying to do some interesting things with backed by Bitcoin or some various variations thereof. I'd be interested in hearing just where do you think that's all going, because certainly one of the cross-border trade issues is Forex, and how to take that element out of cross-border trade.
Well, the last time I spoke on a panel about Bitcoin, I got death threats the next day because I'm not the biggest fan. I mean, cryptocurrencies and e-currencies will not replace the US dollar or the Chinese yuan or sterling anytime soon. But the ability to fulfill cross-border in a timely manner will obviously be needed as the e-commerce market grows. Worldfirst, as it happens, actually holds a Guinness World Record for the fastest international transfer of, I think it's 5 minutes and 45 seconds to move money from move money from the UK to Germany for an e-commerce client. So, that's pretty timely. As far as the development goes, the blockchain conversation that every single investment bank is having at the moment will start to lead into maybe more proprietary currencies, which I don't think we're going to see a unifying kind of Babel Tower currency to bring everything together. Everything's going to be sat there, and if I heard earlier someone talking about how you could use an ATM. Now you can use anyone's ATM as opposed to previously having to go to your own bank's ATM. I wouldn't be surprised later on down the line if we have cryptocurrencies from Goldman's and Merrill's and JP Morgan. There'll be exchange rates for one JP crypto to one Goldman's crypto, and therefore another market for me to try and analyze and trade.
From our side, I'm not into currencies at all, but what we see in the market, and this is part of the requirements of our clients, is that they wanted to have more flexibility when they operate their e-commerce sites to switch between payment providers.
Yeah.
So what we deployed is from a technology point of view, we have two big focuses. One on analytics, that you might be aware that we launched cognitive analytics, which are far more complex and help to predict changes in things like currencies. And on the other side, payment gateway solutions that help you to analyzing for a certain transaction in a certain geography, which is the payment provider you should use. Hooking.
It's always one answer.
Yeah.
Two answers.
There's going to be, it's a demand-led thing, right? So at the moment, we don't see a lot of online shoppers saying, I want to pay with Bitcoin, or I want to pay for my product with a cryptocurrency. And I probably disagree with the fact that we'll start to see a huge proliferation of cryptocurrencies. I don't think that's something that will happen, because at the end of the day, it's something that the governments, the central banks will want to control in quite a regulated environment. So that's something that might limit things a little.
I think the thing with, Accenture is pretty involved in blockchain, and I think best described as distributed ledger infrastructures. And I think the currency side of it and Bitcoin and such is almost a red herring to what the real value is of distributed ledgers. And it's actually probably there's going to be some impact on trade finance and stuff, but I think there's a lot more efficiencies that can be gained along a supply chain, whether that's through smart contracts or verifying and validating products through a supply chain. That is going to be a lot more important. There's a startup that we've been talking to. I think most have heard of, called Block Verify, which is looking at how you can verify products against counterfeiting using distributed ledgers and such. And most companies we speak to are actually building their own version of the blockchain, or rather their own version of a distributed ledger, and they will have subtly different ways that they work. But I think it's there's I think the jury's still out on it. I think it's certainly changing the way, and probably you agree on changing the way technical infrastructures and data infrastructures are being developed.
For us, so far, most of the stuff we have talked is basically about operational efficiency. It's not, we wouldn't call it, raising operational barriers, because we think the market is on the optimization phase, right? If you like, a few years ago, no one was talking actually about optimizing payment methods. Now it's like, well, maybe there's a 2-3% there, that. Yeah. For us, this is something, it has to be done, like omni-channel. It's like, well, it's a no-brainer. If you don't have it now, the strategy now, you should have it for the future. Yeah. And where we are, actually concentrating a lot is on to raise the barriers on the data side. We think the next frontier is to understand, to actually, compete is on data, is to actually action better on data, merchandising, marketing, understanding markets, and that's where we're actually imbibing into our products a lot of cognitive technology to move to actually help our clients to step up
Yeah.
to that.
Is there another question here? Yeah.
So you've been discussing localization and just mentioned optimization, but in the context, I'm more asking about in the context of the website. Say you run a retail website or a marketplace, you've optimized it, A/B tested it, different colors of the buttons, but then you introduce a translation. How do you sort of, I don't know, face the translation issue of a marketplace or a retail website that you've optimized over a certain number of years that you constantly change?
Yeah, but that's exactly the point. The point is, unfortunately, you will have to go through the learning experience all over again. You will have to start from the basic and start evolving, start optimizing, and it's hard work. Going global and being localized is very hard work, and this is where many companies, fail. They don't understand how hard it is, how much more complexity they bring within the organization, and they don't prepare themselves from that. They don't bring enough expertise, and it's also, even if they're prepared, to pay to get expertise is actually difficult, even nowadays, to find people with the right expertise. Luckily, as you said, there are lots of startups, lots of companies that try to provide services, and and that makes life easier. But it's very difficult.
So all of that is true. You have to be always optimizing, right? What we are saying also is the fact that technology is going along with that and helping you to do it better and faster. So, for instance, we run a pilot project with North Face on using an online assistant, but actually that understands natural language, but actually was a machine. It was our Watson product, so it was not a person on the back. So technology is getting there to help companies to bridge that gap, but you will always have to be bridging a gap.
Yeah, but it helps. Maybe that might bring some efficiency, but does it really? Because going back to what Amazon does very, very well, which is starting from the customer and working backward, the first thing you need to do is to listen to the customer. And if you put the technology in the middle of you have a call center, God knows where, and there you miss the point. You can't listen to the customer anymore. Yeah?
Putting Amazon and customer experience in the same phrase does not actually fit. I mean, they sell good stuff and they're very good at that, but you don't go for Amazon to the online experience. So you go when you want to buy, transact. That's a different story.
Yeah, but Amazon is not just Amazon.com. He's actually taking the shares from IBM as well, with the cloud. So I need to get a pretty good job at it.
Yeah.
Chao Liu, you say.
So how we see this is where you are within your market entry into that particular country. So at the moment, I think a lot of companies, when they first enter into, let's say, China, you can have two options. One is the marketplace, where you need to pretty much start from scratch, building up content, localized content, translation, and so on and so forth. The other solution, which is what we've seen, is on your own UK site, you have a skin. So that skin does the translation for your site. And I think as that country grows in importance, because the skin it's a machine translation, so it will never be perfect. But as that country grows in importance for your company, I think that's where you need to have more human element and to be actually doing the SEO work. But the advantage of technology is that you can use technology and enter into 20 different countries within a very short space of time. Of course, the SEO is not going to be perfect. Of course, the translation is not going to be perfect, but it allows you to test the market very, very quickly and very cheap. And afterwards, you see which countries work for you, and then that's when you can commit more resources to that country.
Totally.
Okay, we have another question? Yes.
We all know that retail is very tight margins, and obviously the UK is very competitive as a retail environment as it is. So there's lots of pressures on retailers at the moment. You talk about lots of these service providers to go onto these websites, but again, that will squeeze the margins even further. So what is the best approach to making an venture into some of these marketplaces profitable, because a lot of retailers don't have the endless resources like the marketplaces to make losses every year.
From experience, the majority of people that are looking at a new market use the infrastructure that's there to verify and test the market and make sure it's going to give them the return. So they test, will this market work? Will I be able to create a return on it? As soon as they've got flows that are enough in size that they can warrant investing in some of these technologies themselves, or perhaps going direct to service providers rather than through marketplaces, then they embark on that. So I think it's really, try it using the infrastructure that's around you. And then when you've verified that you are genuinely going to invest in that market, that's when you start to look at solutions that create those efficiencies that a business is looking for.
Well, and actually, that highly depends on what type of retailer you are. Typically, big retailers tend to have, their own strategy before going, and not go through a marketplace. If you're a luxury retailer, probably you don't want to go through a marketplace. You want to create your own brand experience. So that's where, actually it's more, an ROI analysis rather than, a tiptoeing. So to me, like going in a country with a marketplace, it's a bit of a tiptoeing, type of approach. So currently, I work a lot with luxury brands. None of them, will consider that.
Well, I remember actually launching Yoox, Armani.com in China, was one of the first. And I can tell you, although Armani is a big brand, 2 weeks later, no one single order. So it's tough, right? So and I totally agree with you. Is a more experimental approach, a more this is actually a scientific approach. Is analyzing, observing, see how things go, adapting, evolving, and just keep doing it. I mean, Amazon has been doing that for a long time, and we see the results of that actually.
Well, it again depends on the brand.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I don't see, any of the luxury Italian brands selling on Amazon,
No, they don't. The
or
eBay,
or
eBay, yeah.
I think.
So
Do you have a final?
I was going to just to go back to the gentleman's original question, which is if lots of service providers are taking a bit of the margin, what's there for the retailer? I think that the way we look at it is traditionally, if you wanted to enter into a country like China, it's bricks and mortar. So there's heavy investment up front, and maybe it takes years to get your product approved by the customs, and then to set up the store. So there's a huge, the timeline's huge, the risks are huge, the upfront investment is huge. Whereas if we look at the cross-border trading, we've launched a brand within 18 days into China. In comparison, the initial setup costs are low, and because the marketplaces somewhat help you with the sales, they drive the traffic, and if you get the marketing right, in actual fact, is a relatively low cost of entry into a particular country. And of course, once your brand is more established in that country, then you can look at further efficiencies.
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. I think we're just up for time there. It's been a great conversation. We almost had a fight. That's pretty much just what I planned. So thank you very much, and thank you very much. If you have a round of applause, thank you. Thanks, guys. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you very much. Cheers. Great.